They say the most dangerous temptations don't come with warning signs. They don't wear red flags or scream danger. They show up with a friendly smile and a wrench in hand. I didn't see it coming. I wish I had. I wish I could say there was something off from the start. But there wasn't. He was just Caleb, my neighbor. The guy from 2 doors down. The one who always waved. The one who fixed things. The one who made small talk on slow afternoons. He offered to fix the sink. Just the sink. Because Eric kept forgetting. Kept putting it off. And I was tired of asking. Tired of waiting. Tired of being invisible. So I said yes. Just a quick fix. Just 30 minutes. That's what I told myself. But I should have known. I should have noticed the way he leaned against the doorframe when he finished. The way he looked at me, just a little too long. The way something in me stirred when he smiled. It didn't feel like trouble at first. It felt like attention. Like warmth. Like something I hadn't felt in years. He came to fix the sink. But what he did to my life, no repairman could ever undo. I want to say I was stronger than that. That I saw the signs and walked away. But I didn't. I let him in. Not just into my house. Into something deeper. And before you judge me, before you decide what kind of woman I am, let me tell you what it feels like to be untouched. Unseen. Unheard. To lie next to someone every night and still feel like you're sleeping alone. To speak and get silence. To cry and be told you're overreacting. To want and be told not now. Caleb didn't just fix a leak. He noticed me. He asked me how I was. He listened. And for a moment, I felt like I existed again. That feeling? That's what got me. Not the man. Not the muscles or the charm. It was the way he made me feel alive. And that's where it all started. If you've ever made one small decision that spun out of control. If you've ever crossed a line you swore you never would. If you've ever just wanted to feel seen, then maybe you'll understand. Subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold. You won't want to miss what happens next. Because what started with a leaky sink led to the most irreversible choice of my life. And I'm still trying to clean up the mess. I've been married to Eric for 14 years. 14 long years. Some good, some just routine. He wasn't a bad man. Just busy. Focused. Always chasing the next goal. The next contract. The next deal. He used to hold me when he walked through the door. Kiss my forehead. Ask what I made for dinner like he couldn't wait to sit and talk. But somewhere along the way, the warmth faded. Now, he walks in still on a call. Barely looks up. Dinner's eaten in silence or in front of the news. Sometimes he leaves his plate half full and disappears into the office upstairs. No kiss. No touch. Just footsteps, fading up the stairs. I'm 38. And I've spent the last 5 years wondering if I'm still a woman. Or just a fixture in this house. A mother. A meal. A soft voice telling people where their socks are. We have 2 teenagers. They're in their own worlds now, school, friends, sports, TikTok. They come home, toss their bags on the floor, raid the fridge, and vanish to their rooms. I don't blame them. That's just how it is. So the house, it's quiet. Too quiet. And during the day, it's just me and the ticking clock. I fold laundry that no one notices. Vacuum floors that are just going to be dirty again tomorrow. Make tea, sit by the kitchen window, and wonder where I went. Not physically. I know where I am. But where did I go? The woman who used to laugh without thinking. The woman who used to feel wanted. Desired. Now, I look in the mirror and barely recognize her. The spark's gone from my eyes. My skin looks tired. I even stopped wearing lipstick. Because, who's looking? Eric doesn't notice. Hasn't for years. I try. I do. I ask about his day. I rub his shoulders. I leave notes in his briefcase. But eventually, when your efforts keep falling into silence, you stop trying. And that's the space Caleb walked into. Not the space in my house, but the space in me. He lives 2 doors down. Moved in about a year ago after his divorce. We didn't talk much at first, just friendly waves and nods across driveways. But everyone liked him. He helped old Mr. Jennings with his fence. Helped the Thompsons move a heavy couch. always fixing something. And one day, he saw me in the front yard struggling with a stubborn hose reel. He smiled, came over, and fixed it without a second thought. Just easy. We chatted. Nothing deep. Just weather, gardens, dogs. But he listened. He really listened. With full attention. Eye contact. And I remember going back inside and feeling lighter. It had been so long since someone looked at me like I mattered. Like what I said had weight. Like I was seen. It's wild how just 5 minutes of real attention can linger in your chest like perfume. After that, I'd see him more often. At the mailbox. Walking his dog. Sometimes he'd wave from his porch with a coffee in hand. Nothing inappropriate. Not then. But slowly, there was a rhythm to it. An unspoken comfort. Like we were both carrying something heavy, and without even realizing, we were starting to share the load. Then came the sink. A minor leak that Eric promised he'd fix. But weeks went by, and it just dripped, and dripped, and dripped. I brought it up again, and Eric sighed. Told me he was exhausted. That I could call someone if it bothered me so much. So I mentioned it in passing to Caleb. He offered before I even finished the sentence. Said he'd pop over the next afternoon and take a look. Said it wouldn't take long. I hesitated. I really did. But then I remembered how he made me feel that day in the yard. Seen. Light. And I said yes. It was just a sink. Just a neighbor helping out. That's what I told myself. But the truth? I think I wanted to see him. I think I wanted to feel that feeling again. Even if just for a few minutes. The house felt warmer when he was near. And the kitchen didn't feel so cold when he stood in it. I always sit in the kitchen with my tea. It's the quietest place in the house. The one room that holds all my silence. Where I've cried into dish towels and stared out the window wondering if this is all there is. But that day, when Caleb stood by the sink, sleeves rolled up, cracking jokes about my stubborn faucet, that kitchen came alive. And so did something in me. Not in a scandalous way. Not in some wild, forbidden fantasy. It was softer than that. Sadder, too. It felt like hope. Or maybe just the memory of it. And that's where it all began. The leak wasn't even serious at first. Just a slow, soft drip under the sink. Annoying more than anything. You wouldn't even hear it unless the house was quiet, which mine always is. Eric said he'd fix it. This weekend, he promised, without even looking up from his phone. But the weekend came and went. And the drip was still there. Every time I opened that cabinet, it felt like a reminder. Of how often I had to wait. Of how many little things just didn't matter enough to fix. One morning, I was out front watering the plants and Caleb passed by. He made a joke about my stubborn garden hose, said he thought it had a vendetta against me. I laughed. A real laugh. And then I just casually mentioned the leak. I wasn't asking him to do anything. I wasn't hinting or fishing. It just slipped out, like a thought that had been sitting too long behind my teeth. He didn't miss a beat. Said, "You want me to take a look? Probably just a loose joint or worn washer." Then smiled. 30 minutes, tops. You shouldn't have to wait for weeks over something that simple. I opened my mouth to say no. To say, that's okay, Eric's got it. But I didn't. I hesitated. And in that hesitation, something cracked open. I nodded. Just once. And said, "Sure, if you really don't mind." He said he'd be over the next afternoon after his lunch break. Said it like it was no big deal. And maybe it wasn't. But it felt like one. The next day, right on time, I heard a knock at the door. There he was, tool bag in one hand, coffee in the other. Same easy smile. Same quiet confidence. I let him in. Offered him water. Tried not to act like my heart was beating just a little faster than normal. He kneeled by the sink, tools clinking softly. Rolled up his sleeves. And I just stood there for a moment, unsure what to do with myself. So I made tea. Tried to busy my hands. He asked where I got the backsplash tiles. Said he liked the color, called it calming. Then he said the kitchen smelled amazing. Asked what I'd been cooking. I told him it was just leftover soup. He said, "Well, it smells like comfort." Then, He looked up at me, really looked, and said, "You've got a great smile. I don't think I've ever told you that." I froze. Just for a second. Just long enough to feel a wave rise in my chest that I didn't know what to do with. Because it had been years since anyone had told me that. Since anyone had looked at me, not through me, not past me, but at me. I smiled again, out of instinct. Then caught myself. Looked away. I told myself it was nothing. That he was just being friendly. That he was just a kind man, saying kind things, because that's who he was. But there was a shift. Right there. Right then. I felt it. And I think he did too. We talked while he worked. Not just the usual neighbor stuff. He asked about my hobbies. What I did with my time. Said it must be nice having quiet mornings to myself. I told him sometimes it was. But other times it was lonely. I don't even know why I said that. I never admit that out loud. But with him, it just came out. He nodded. Didn't say much. But his silence felt full, not empty. It felt like listening. At one point, he tapped the pipe gently and said, "Got it." Wiped his hands, stood up. "You're all set. No more midnight dripping keeping you up." And then he added softly, like it wasn't meant to land as heavy as it did, "Every woman deserves peace in her own kitchen." It hit me. Harder than it should have. Because he wasn't just talking about plumbing. And I wasn't just feeling grateful. When he packed up his things and walked to the door, he turned, smiled, and said, "You ever need help with anything else, just ask." Then he left. And I stood in that kitchen, with my tea growing cold, and a silence around me that felt louder than ever. Something had shifted, and I couldn't unfeel it, not even if I tried. After Caleb left, I stood in the kitchen for a long time. Longer than I needed to. The sink was quiet now. No more dripping. But inside me, something had started making noise. It wasn't loud. It was just this buzzing. A kind of low hum beneath my ribs. I felt lighter somehow. Brighter. Like someone had opened a window in a room I didn't know was stuffy. I caught myself smiling. Just a little. Then I frowned. Because it wasn't the sink I was thinking about. It was him. His voice. His smile. The way he said I had a great one too. I kept hearing it. Over and over. Not just the words, but the way he said them. Like he meant them. Like he saw something in me that even I had forgotten was there. And that scared me. Because I liked it. More than I wanted to admit. Was it wrong, just to enjoy being seen? I didn't touch him. I didn't flirt. I didn't even do anything. But it still felt like I'd crossed something. Something invisible. It was like I'd opened a door in me. One I didn't even realize had been closed. And now that there was air coming through, I couldn't pretend I didn't feel it. I tried to shake it off. Went upstairs. Started folding laundry. But even in the silence, my mind kept drifting. To his voice. His hands. The way he looked at me like I was a person. Not a chore. Not a habit. A woman. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed. Turned. Every creak in the house felt louder than usual. Eric lay beside me, facing the other way. Breathing soft. Deep. Peaceful. Distant. I stared at the ceiling and wondered how we got here. How two people could lie so close and feel so far. The next morning, I pulled out an old photo album. I don't even know why. I hadn't looked through it in years. There we were, me and Eric. On a beach, laughing. Covered in sand. He had his arms around me, and I was looking at him like he was the only thing that existed. Back then, he was. There was another photo, our anniversary dinner. The dress I wore. The way he looked at me from across the table. Eyes full of spark. Of hunger. Of love. And somewhere between those pages, I felt something sink inside me. Because that version of us was gone. And I didn't know when we'd lost it. Or if we could ever get it back. I thought about Caleb again. Not in a fantasy way. Not in a what-if kind of way. Just in a why did this feel like the first real conversation I've had in months kind of way. I wasn't planning anything. God knows I wasn't looking for anything. But something had been opened. Something tender. Something quiet. And I didn't know how to close it. The next few days, I kept busy. Laundry, dishes, groceries, everything I usually do. But he was there, in the back of my mind. Every time I passed the sink, every time I made tea, every time I glanced out the kitchen window and saw his driveway. I hated that part of me. The part that was waiting. For what, I didn't know. Just the idea that maybe I'd run into him again. Maybe he'd smile. Ask how I was doing. Make me feel like me. I started wearing lipstick again. Nothing dramatic. Just a soft pink. The one I used to wear when Eric and I went out to dinner. It felt silly. But it also felt good. And that's when I realized. I missed feeling like a woman. Not just a mom. Not just a wife. Not just someone keeping the house from falling apart. A woman. And Caleb. Caleb reminded me she was still in there. I felt guilty for that. Really, I did. But I also felt alive. And that was the beginning of the real trouble. Because once you feel something wake up inside you, it doesn't just go back to sleep. He started stopping by more often. Always with a reason. A borrowed dish from the soup I sent over last week. A quick question about who he used for lawn care. One time, he offered to help when he saw me struggling with the garage door. It always started small. But the conversations got longer. The air between us felt different. Lighter. Warmer. There was laughter. Not loud or forced. Just soft, easy. Like exhaling after holding your breath too long. The kind of laughter that stays with you even after the door closes. And the eye contact. It lingered. Just a second too long. Not in a way that screamed anything, but in a way that whispered everything. He'd look at me like I was interesting. Not just present. Not just polite. But interesting. One afternoon, it started to rain out of nowhere. A sudden, heavy downpour. I was standing by the porch, trying to pull in the patio cushions when he came jogging over, already soaked, laughing. He said, "Mind if I waited out here for a bit?" And I said yes. Of course I said yes. We stood there on the porch, rain pouring around us. I made tea. He stepped inside, left his shoes by the door without being asked. Sat at the kitchen table like he'd done it 100 times. Like it was normal. I handed him a cup. And I remember, my hand was trembling just enough to make the spoon inside clink. I hoped he didn't notice. But I think he did. We sat in silence at first. Not awkward, just full. Then he started talking. Told me about his divorce. About how it wasn't sudden. Not really. How it started with little things. A tone. A missed text. A night on the couch. Until one day, they both just stopped trying. He said she stopped looking at him like he mattered. And eventually, he stopped looking at her at all. I don't know why, but hearing that made something swell in my chest. Not judgment. Not pity. Recognition. I told him about Eric. Not the bad things. Just the silence. The growing distance. The way I could be dressed up, standing right in front of him, and still feel invisible. He didn't interrupt. Didn't offer advice. Just listened. Really listened. And that was the most dangerous part. Because it had been so long since someone just let me be honest without turning away. I don't even remember what started it. Maybe I was passing the sugar. Maybe it was the way he leaned in slightly. But suddenly, our hands touched. Not by accident. Not on purpose either. Just in that space between. And we froze. Both of us. Like the air had gone still, even with the storm outside. His eyes searched mine. Mine searched his. And something passed between us. Something silent. Heavy. I pulled my hand back. Slowly. And I smiled. Not out of happiness. Out of panic. Out of nerves. Out of the desperate need to pretend nothing happened. He smiled too. But his eyes didn't match it. We sat there a little longer. But it wasn't the same. The line had been touched, if not crossed. When the rain let up, he stood and thanked me for the tea. Said he'd see me around. And he left. The door closed softly behind him. And I stood there, still holding my mug, still feeling the warmth in my palm. But it wasn't the tea. It was something else. Something deeper. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because of what happened. but because of what almost did. Because once you felt something like that, something real, something charged, something alive, it doesn't leave you. And part of me didn't want it to. He started stopping by more often. Always with a reason. A borrowed dish from the soup I sent over last week. A quick question about who he used for lawn care. One time, he offered to help when he saw me struggling with the garage door. It always started small. But the conversations got longer. The air between us felt different. Lighter. Warmer. There was laughter. Not loud or forced. Just soft, easy. Like exhaling after holding your breath too long. The kind of laughter that stays with you even after the door closes. And the eye contact. It lingered. Just a second too long. Not in a way that screamed anything, but in a way that whispered everything. He'd look at me like I was interesting. Not just present. Not just polite. But interesting. One afternoon, it started to rain out of nowhere. A sudden, heavy downpour. I was standing by the porch, trying to pull in the patio cushions when he came jogging over, already soaked, laughing. He said, "Mind if I waited out here for a bit?" And I said yes. Of course I said yes. We stood there on the porch, rain pouring around us. I made tea. He stepped inside, left his shoes by the door without being asked. Sat at the kitchen table like he'd done it 100 times. Like it was normal. I handed him a cup. And I remember, my hand was trembling just enough to make the spoon inside clink. I hoped he didn't notice. But I think he did. We sat in silence at first. Not awkward, just full. Then he started talking. Told me about his divorce. About how it wasn't sudden. Not really. How it started with little things. A tone. A missed text. A night on the couch. Until one day, they both just stopped trying. He said she stopped looking at him like he mattered. And eventually, he stopped looking at her at all. I don't know why, but hearing that made something swell in my chest. Not judgment. Not pity. Recognition. I told him about Eric. Not the bad things. Just the silence. The growing distance. The way I could be dressed up, standing right in front of him, and still feel invisible. He didn't interrupt. Didn't offer advice. Just listened. Really listened. And that was the most dangerous part. Because it had been so long since someone just let me be honest without turning away. I don't even remember what started it. Maybe I was passing the sugar. Maybe it was the way he leaned in slightly. But suddenly, our hands touched. Not by accident. Not on purpose either. Just in that space between. And we froze. Both of us. Like the air had gone still, even with the storm outside. His eyes searched mine. Mine searched his. And something passed between us. Something silent. Heavy. I pulled my hand back. Slowly. And I smiled. Not out of happiness. Out of panic. Out of nerves. Out of the desperate need to pretend nothing happened. He smiled too. But his eyes didn't match it. We sat there a little longer. But it wasn't the same. The line had been touched, if not crossed. When the rain let up, he stood and thanked me for the tea. Said he'd see me around. And he left. The door closed softly behind him. And I stood there, still holding my mug, still feeling the warmth in my palm. But it wasn't the tea. It was something else. Something deeper. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because of what happened. But because of what almost did. Because once you felt something like that, something real, something charged, something alive, it doesn't leave you. And part of me didn't want it to. A few days passed. The weather stayed gray. The kind that settles into your bones and makes everything feel heavier. Eric told me he had a business trip coming up last minute. 2 nights in Chicago. Maybe 3. I nodded. Didn't ask questions. He barely kissed my cheek before he left. Just like that, I was alone again. The silence in the house felt different this time. Not peaceful. Not restful. Just waiting. It was late afternoon when I heard the knock. Not loud. Not rushed. Just familiar. I opened the door, and there he was. Caleb. Holding a small wrench and an apologetic smile. He said he thought he heard something odd coming from our dishwasher the last time he was over. Said it sounded like a belt was slipping. Did I want him to take a quick look? I could have said no. Should have, maybe. But I didn't. I stepped aside. Let him in. There was something in the air thick, like it was pressing against our skin. The same tension as that stormy afternoon. Only now it was louder. Heavier. More dangerous. I made tea again. Because that's what I do when I don't know what else to do. He knelt down by the dishwasher. Checked something. Tightened a couple things. Said it was probably nothing. But we both knew that wasn't why he came. I handed him the tea. Our fingers touched again. This time, it didn't feel accidental. It felt inevitable. We sat at the table, like before. But everything had changed. The rain started again. Slow at first, then steady. I watched it trail down the window like fingers tracing the glass. We didn't say much. Just sipped. Then he looked at me. Not just at me. Into me. And quietly, carefully, he said, "Tell me to leave, and I will." My throat tightened. I could hear the rain. The clock ticking. My own heartbeat. But I couldn't speak. I didn't nod. I didn't shake my head. I just sat there. Not saying a word. And he knew. God help me, he knew. He stood up. Walked slowly around the table. Stopped in front of me. I looked up at him. And I didn't move. He reached out. Touched my cheek, barely. Like he was asking permission with his fingertips. And I leaned in. Not much. Just enough. That was all it took. It wasn't fast. It wasn't rough. It wasn't like anything I'd imagined. It was quiet. Almost reverent. Like we both knew we were about to do something we couldn't undo. But neither of us wanted to stop. His hands trembled slightly. So did mine. There was hesitation. Regret already hiding beneath the surface. But we didn't stop. We kissed. Soft. Slow. Like we were both trying to memorize the moment. There was no rush. No hunger, even. Just connection. After so long in the cold, we both needed warmth. Even if it wasn't ours to have. Time didn't exist for those few minutes. Only breath. Only touch. Only the deep ache of being human. When it was over, he stepped back. Looked at me with something like sadness. Or maybe relief. I don't know. I couldn't read his face through the fog of what we'd just done. He didn't say a word. Just left. Closed the door behind him. And with it, something in me. I stood there for a while. Frozen. Like if I moved, it would all become real. Eventually, I went upstairs. Took off my earrings. Washed my face. But I left the robe on. I sat on the bed. Still damp from the rain that had come in through the open window. And I stared at the sink from across the room. The same sink he'd fixed just days ago. The same place where it started. And now, the place where everything had changed. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there. Alone. Wrapped in a robe that still smelled like his cologne. And that night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was afraid of what I'd done. But because I couldn't stop thinking about the part of me that said yes. When I never thought I would. After that night, Caleb stopped coming around. No more casual waves. No more borrowed dishes or neighborly favors. No knocks at the door. No laughter from the porch. It was like he disappeared. Not from the world. Just from mine. And I didn't chase him. I couldn't. Because if I did, I knew I'd fall further. So I avoided the kitchen window. The one where I used to glance out, hoping to see him walk by. Now, I couldn't even look at it without feeling something twist in my chest. Eric came back the next evening. Wheeled his suitcase inside, gave me a tired kiss on the cheek. Asked how things were. I said fine. He didn't notice anything was off. Or maybe he did, and just didn't want to ask. We had dinner that night, chicken and rice. He said it was good. But I had burned the rice. The kids didn't say anything. They barely noticed. Too busy scrolling, chewing, disappearing into their own routines. I could barely swallow mine. I kept busy the next few days. Tried to act normal. Tried to make sense of what I'd done. But everything felt wrong. Too loud. Too quiet. Too heavy. I overcooked dinner twice that week. Dropped a glass and didn't bother sweeping right away. Snapped at my daughter for leaving her shoes by the door. I apologized later, hugged her tight, longer than I needed to. She just said, "It's okay, Mom," and went back to her room. But it wasn't okay. None of it was. The sink worked perfectly now. Not a single drip. But I hated looking at it. It had become something else, not a sink. A reminder. A symbol of the moment everything cracked open inside me. And then, late one night, my phone buzzed. It was him. Just one text. "I'm sorry." 2 words. Simple. Direct. Crushing. I stared at the screen for what felt like forever. Typed out a reply. Deleted it. Typed another. Deleted that one too. My thumb hovered over the keyboard like it had its own heartbeat. I wanted to say me too. I wanted to say, "Why did you stop coming?" I wanted to say thank you. And I hate you. And I miss you. But I didn't send anything. I just sat there. Phone in hand, screen glowing, silence wrapping around me like a second skin. And then I hit delete. Not because I didn't care, but because I cared too much. And because answering him meant admitting it wasn't a mistake. That it was a choice. And I wasn't ready to face that yet. I turned off the phone. Left it on the counter. Walked up the stairs. And that night, I lay in bed next to Eric, who had already fallen asleep. His back turned. Breathing steady. As if nothing in the world had changed. But everything had. And the worst part? I couldn't tell anyone. Not a friend. Not a sister. Not a stranger. It was mine to carry. Mine to live with. Every single day. Some nights, when the house is quiet and everyone's asleep, I sit at the kitchen table and just think. Not about what we did. Not the kiss. Not the touch. Not the robe still folded in the laundry basket. But about why. Why I let it happen. Why it felt so easy in that moment. Why I wanted it so badly, even though I knew how wrong it was. Was I just another lonely housewife? Another cliché? Or was I a woman who just needed to feel alive? That question haunts me. Because maybe it's both. Maybe being lonely and being alive are 2 sides of the same ache. And when someone finally looks at you like you matter, like you're not just someone's wife, or mother, or background noise, it does something to you. Something I can't fully explain. Only feel. And I feel it all the time now. I'll be doing the dishes or folding towels, and my mind drifts back to that moment in the rain. His hand brushing mine. His voice, low and careful, asking me if I wanted him to leave. He would have if I said yes. He would have walked out, and maybe none of this would have happened. But I didn't say yes. And now, I carry that silence everywhere I go. Sometimes I wonder if Eric suspects anything. If he notices the way I avoid his touch now. The way I stare at my food more than I eat it. The way I don't ask him about his trips anymore, because I don't really care about the answers. But he doesn't ask either. Maybe he's grateful for the quiet. Or maybe he's just as numb as I am, and we're both pretending this marriage is still intact because it's easier than tearing it down. Sometimes I wonder if it ever really was love. Or just convenience. Momentum. Habit. We were so young when we started. So eager to build something. And we did. A house. A family. A routine. But somewhere along the way, the us part got lost. Now we just coexist. He pays the bills. I make the meals. We talk, but never deeply. We sleep in the same bed, but in different worlds. And in that space, I started fading. Caleb didn't save me. He didn't fix anything, really. But he noticed. He saw the part of me that had been starving for years. And he fed it, even if just for a moment. I still think about him. Not in a romantic way. Not even in a guilty way. Just in a real way. Because he's tied to this chapter of me now. The part one didn't know existed until it came rushing out. One afternoon, I saw him outside. He was trimming the hedge by his front walk. Sweat on his forehead. Headphones in. I stood behind the curtain. Watched him for a minute. He never looked up. And in that moment, I realized he wasn't mine. He never really was. And maybe I was never his either. We were just two people who crossed paths in the middle of our own heartbreak. And for a moment, we made each other feel less alone. But the ache he left behind? It's different than the one I had before. Before, I was empty. Now, I'm cracked open. He fixed the sink. But what he left broken in me still leaks every day. And no one sees it. Not Eric. Not the kids. Not the friends I smile at in grocery aisles. Only me. I live with it. I breathe with it. I carry it in the quiet. And I don't know if I'll ever feel whole again. Have you ever done something you swore you'd never do? Not out of impulse. Not out of recklessness. But out of need. Out of silence. Out of longing. Out of that desperate ache just to feel alive? Because that's what happened to me. And now I live in the in-between, between what was and what can never be again. Between the version of myself I knew and the one I discovered, then lost in a single, quiet storm. So I'm asking you, was I wrong? Or was I just human? Let me know in the comments. Be honest. Be kind. Be raw, if you want to be. Because stories like mine don't get told at dinner parties. They live in whispers. In journals. In midnight thoughts we're too ashamed to say out loud. But they matter. We matter. Even the broken parts. And if this story moved something in you, if it stirred an old ache or a buried memory, if it made you feel seen or just a little less alone, then subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold. There's more to come. More stories that cut deep into the heart. Because life isn't black and white. It's all the messy, complicated shades in between. And now I know that sometimes the most dangerous temptations don't shout. They whisper. They come dressed as kindness, as attention, as a neighbor with a wrench and a smile. And it's in those quiet moments, those split seconds where your soul feels more awake than it has in years, that everything can change. Forever. I stand in the kitchen sometimes, tea cooling on the counter, sunlight filtering through the blinds like soft forgiveness. And I listen, even though the sink is fixed. I swear I still hear a drip. Faint. Steady. Like something in me, still leaking. And maybe it always will.